And Eric, my best winemaker.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Just got him to say Roll Tide. That's the first time. I've been trying to get him to say Roll Tide for about a week now. But
What are we sipping on?
I think we're sipping on some Saint-Chamond, 2011.
I think the main thing is that we're already drinking it 11:30 in the backyard in Mississippi. Strong power move.
It's a tough
God's
job.
country.
It's a tough job. Somebody's got to do it, We got a lot of strong wine in front of us today from all over. Here in Mississippi, they seem to they have one thing in common at least. Eric Railsback, wait, actually two things in common.
Love stuff.
Two things in common. He makes it or imports it or sells it, and then I sell it for him. Eric, why don't you give us a little rundown about your background, like how you started out in wine?
I started out in wine very young. Grew up in a religious family, no drinking. But my brother would sneak in bottles of wine when I was in middle school in Kansas. Grew up in a dry county. So it was great. My older brother is 5 years older. He was a sommelier. So I grew up doing all the work that he didn't want to in the restaurants, doing bread and water, polishing glasses, pretty much getting bitched around by the older brother, which was awesome. But he really hooked me up and taught me a bunch of things, introduced me to all kinds of people. We grew up after Kansas, moved to the Willamette Valley in Oregon, which is another great wine region, mostly for Chard and Pinot.
Is this from the Willamette? This is from Oregon, correct?
That is
the
from
Lafayette?
No, it's from the Columbia Gorge in Oregon.
Columbia Gorge, that's right.
So our family, my mom's side of the family, were farmers, wheat, cattle farmers up in the gorge, which is super beautiful area and a place that I think is really exciting. I think the Willamette, it's been around obviously forever. It's the most famous wine growing region in Oregon. But I think terroir and potential, the gorge is super exciting. Lots of different soil types. Temperatures are super diverse. You've got really rainy areas closer to Portland, all the way to deserts, closer to, the Dalles, Dufur, where my family farms. But as a kid, my brother and I would grow up there. We'd pick rye, before harvest in the wheat fields, and really fell in love with this area. And I think now there's starting to be some cool things going on. It's really the beginning, the infancy of what's happening in wine country out there. But we definitely want to, be there. Later on, there's this great vineyard that we work with. It's all farmed organically, pretty cool site. And it's actually planted to what works really well in Oregon. I think a lot of people in Oregon are trying to be really safe, and it's known for Pinot, or they're planting Cab, more kind of cash crops. But the growers that we're working with there really did the research and found the data, and they figured out, it's essentially has all the same characteristics as Cornas. Soil similar, temperature is similar, so a lot of Mediterranean varieties we work with there. So Syrah, Grenache, Minthia, Albarino, Chenin, bunch of fun stuff. So it's just third leaf now. So, the grapes really start firing after 4 years. So production is growing every year, but first year, 21, there was almost nothing from the vineyard. So we made 2.5 tons, about 130 cases, pretty small.
Yeah, I got 5 cases for the entire state to sell.
Because we love Sippy.
Yeah.
That's a strong.
Mississippi strong.
Yeah, that's a strong allocation.
3.5%. But
3.5%. Well, hey, not too bad. After you turned 18 or 19, did you go to college, or what did you do from there?
So I knew that I really wanted to be in wine before I was 21, which in America, it's a little hard to get into it pretty hard if you're, especially not in a wine family and, growing up in a dry county. And my parents were all teachers. My grandparents were teachers, so I had to go to college. I majored in business, econ, with a French minor because I really wanted to take French just so I could get the pronunciation down so I could talk about wine. Because at the time I worked at this restaurant where we had an amazing wine list, and the sommelier couldn't pronounce a damn word. Any grape variety producer, it was just the worst accent ever. Not calling you out for accents or anything down here in Mississippi, but so I was like, I'm just going to take French classes to figure it out. And then somehow I was the only guy in the whole French program, all ladies and me. So I was like, I'm going to see this through. Got really into it. I love, everything about the French language and the culture and the food. And then I figured out if I kept taking French classes, I could go to France for a semester and live over there, which I ended up doing. But I figured that I would just go to Europe and learn, because in Europe you can start drinking when you're 18. So I worked in a restaurant in college in Santa Barbara called Wine Cask, which was a pretty serious program at the time. It was a Grand Award wine list, one of the best lists in the country. They also had a retail store and a wine bar. I knew a decent amount about wine, but I didn't know that much. Now I look back at the list and all the things I was drinking. I was like, wow, I can't believe, I
I
was
drank
19
this,
and I was drinking this, and I got a scholarship to school, and so I was working all the time, making all this money, and so I would literally just spend it all in wine, which is why I eventually got kicked off campus, because I had a suitcase of, at the time it was probably like $2,000 worth of crazy Burgundies at Ravenel and Dovisa and all the things that I like to drink now, but in a religious school, no booze on campus. So I had to move out, or luckily I kept my scholarship, didn't get kicked out of school. But I would come home every night from work at the restaurant, and I had this book called the Revue de Vin de France, and I would just call all my favorite wineries, like super famous wineries I had no business talking to. And my French was terrible at the time, so I'd be very nervous, so I'd have to have, a glass or two after work. Call them up, and after maybe a week or two of doing this, I got really lucky, and I called Domaine Dujac.
Speaking French when you're calling them, or
I pretend that it was French, but it was, it was not great.
Like me and my Duolingo.
No, it was
morning.
not that bad, but it was, it wasn't amazing. So I called Dujac, and it's a family, started by a French gentleman, Jacques Cess, but he married an American, had a kid. They sent him to school in London. He went to college there. He married an American as well. So at this point, they're like, I don't even know the percentage, but they're probably like 65% American. But I'm trying to speak to him in French. And he's like, you don't have to do this. You can speak in English. And I keep trying to speak in French. And he's like, no, seriously, please don't do that. You're messing up our whole language. You're offending not only me, but our whole,
Our whole culture.
Yeah. So I went into the English. But he was great. He didn't have room for me that year. This was 2006. But he said he would put me on the list for the 2007 harvest, which was amazing. So I ended up working in Austria that year, but came back in 2007 to work at Dujac, which is, one of the most famous domains. Great Pinot and Maurice Antony.
And you make this wine with Jeremy Seix now, right?
Yeah.
The Gevrey Chambertin.
We still work together. He works with us at Presqu'île, so he consults.
We're talking about the open.
You are.
Was that the Garsard that you were talking about?
Yeah, Le Cun Grisart, the Gevrey Chambertin they do with Jeremy Seix.
But that was, for me, the start. That's what I love about the wine business, people and the connections and who you know. And, obviously, being young, you want to learn as much as possible, but also just working for great people and the connections. And so doing harvest at Dujac, I was able to meet Robert Bohr from Grand Cru Selections, but I had no interest of being a winemaker. And I certainly hated American wine. I was a pretty snobby sommelier that just wanted to drink European stuff. And I thought American wine was terrible. And that really changed when I opened up a restaurant called RN74. We had a really old cellar consigned from one gentleman, millions of dollars. And we had some domestic wines from the 50s, 60s, some of the original stuff planted there. Inglenook 55 Pinot for me was a game changer. But we would do all these blind tastings there too with Raj Parr, who was one of my mentors. And back in the day, those wines in California, you would think they're Bordeaux or Burgundy. They were so elegant and balanced, which, with the whole parkerization of wine, everything was then sweet. There was sugar, ripeness. Everyone was just going for power in your face. So that's why I didn't like domestic wine. But that's when I saw that, in California, there's potential. You can actually make really good stuff. You just shouldn't mess it up in the winery by adding things, just for a reviewer. And so in 2010, I started Ludi Santa Barbara with a buddy of mine from college, and we started making a little bit of juice in God's country down south.
Where did this interaction and connection come from?
It's one of those chat rooms, right?
Yeah. I flew out to San Francisco for a tasting, and our boy Eric here had on an Alabama hat, and I had a suit on. And it was for Martine's wine. So Martine Saunier is in there yelling about olives, pouring at the champagne table. And I see across the room Eric with his hat on. He had an Alabama hat on. And I want to say, hey, Alabama, I'm Mississippi, baby. And he's, no, not Alabama. So after that, we went, and who's the winemaker that Gilles Robon, the Crozet Hermitage guy?
Yeah.
So we went to the table Savoie, and we started drinking Argile, and what was the other Savoie producer? Do you remember?
Curtet and
Curtet.
Ardoisier.
That's right, Ardoisier and Curtet, yeah. So we started drinking that, having a good time. After these tastings, there's always after tasting, or you're crushing beer and cocktails and maybe
After
some
tasting.
some
Just
wine.
refresh your course, you know. You got to hydrate after tasting wine all day.
I was at a bar having a beer, you know, a little bit nervous being from Mississippi and the first time in Cali, and Eric pulled up, got out, saw me, came in, had a beer with me. Then we walked over to the tasting where that was at, and we kind of hit it off. And I told him, I said, hey, man, you want to come? Alabama plays Ole Miss this year. He hit me up. He sent a case of bangers. We had some good wines, and we hung out and had a good time. And he said, oh, by the way, I make wine. You know, let's do some business in Mississippi. And I had just started my company. I was about a year and a half in, and I was only French and Italian and Portuguese. So that was all I was focused on. I had decided that I wasn't going to sell any California, any Oregon, no American wines. Kind of much like yourself, like France is where it's at. We can't get French wines. When I started my company, there were only 2 Bordeaux's in the state, right? There were 2 Bordeaux's. There was 1 or 2 Amarones. There was really nothing. There was Burgundy, but it was Louis Jadot, and that's kind of about it. So I wanted to sell mostly French. I didn't even entertain the idea that I wanted to sell any California wines. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll try your wine. A month later, I'm cooking some steak, and I see his wine there that he left for me, which was a Cab Franc. I picked up the bottle, and I was like, oh, I'll pop this and try it. I'll eat some steak tonight with the wife. And I was like, man, this is delicious. You know, it's not like any California wine that I've tried, which is, you know, usually it's California wine for me is a little too sweet. It's overripe. It has jammy notes depending on what you get, especially with bigger wines. But it was very balanced and precise and just overall delicious, and I couldn't put it down.
You know, you talk a lot about producers, companies not having faith in the Mississippi market, that there's a demand for wine. And even in the 5 years that I've been doing this now, I've seen this trend where people are wanting to try more new and interesting wines, quality wines. They're looking for organic, native yeasts, just this direction towards quality and production over, you know, you were talking about California having all these added residual sugars and just these highly manipulated
Purple
wines,
color, baby.
cheap, approachable wines, but it's what people knew, it's what they wanted, these sweet, overripe fruit wines. And now I really see this direction, especially in our market, where people are branching out and trying new things. And that's why, you know, it's been over the course of the past 5 years, just the selection of Mississippi has grown greatly.
You know, there's so many projects, and I'm never, you know, just sitting at my house like, I need to start another project. How are we doing it? It's more about the people, and it's always organic. Like, you meet someone, you connect, you know, working with Wes, working with you. It's more of a passionate business. You know, we're not in it to get rich. I'm not at home counting my money. I'm here on the road with Wesley, you know, but
Driving through the Delta.
through the Delta.
What I love about his wines are, you know, where they come from. The San Ynez Valley, Santa Barbara, the Transverse Valley, the cool climate, the growing season year round. You can grow anything there, and you know, the more you go inland, the warmer it gets, the different grape varieties you can plant. So it's just this plethora of different grape varieties. He chose to do Claret Blanche and Vermentino's. He did 3 single vineyard Vermentino's, all different. I love the salinity in those wines, the high acid, right? Like Presqu'îles in the San Ynez Valley or Santa Maria Valley. These wines are not your everyday rum bower, heavy oak, buttery. They're crisp and clean and balanced, and you know, everything that I want in a wine that I started drinking, which was mostly French, right? So you're able to get the climate to grow these grapes, and you're not over harvesting. What's the alcohol in this? 12, 13?
I mean, a lot of our alcohols are
Yeah.
11.5 to 13.3,
yeah.
but they're all
12.1.
very low alcohol. And so what we love about here is we get great ripeness at low bricks because we get a lot of ripeness from more sunlight instead of temperature spikes. So being the only transverse valley in North America, it's right where the coastline turns and starts going east to west. So all the mountain ranges and the coast are going there. And so we have just a funnel of wind and cool air coming off the ocean. So it's always cold, and that's why you have that diversity of not only soil, but temperature. And so the general rule is every mile you drive east, it's a degree warmer. And so on the coast here at Presqu'île, cool climate grapes, Pinot, Chard. I love to plant Syrah on cool climate grapes. I think that's one thing about Santa Barbara. People, they watch Sideways, so they think Pinot Noir has to come from Santa Barbara. But Syrah is the jam, and I think Santa Barbara will be famous for Syrah in 10 years, and we're laying the groundwork, but you just can't mess it up. It's these cool climate sites, it's savory, it has all the tertiary notes that we love from the Northern Rhone, and it has the balance and ripeness that you can have in California.
You've been in Mississippi for 5-6 years now, let's say. You've seen the market developing, growing, and you work with markets all over the country. We talked earlier about companies and producers and whatnot not having faith in the Mississippi market. What's your take on the Mississippi market as you see it comparing to all these large markets where a lot of producers focus their time and effort?
Do I need to leave for this, or are you gonna?
Wesley should go.
I should go.
No, I mean, obviously I love it because I come to Mississippi at least twice a year. I wouldn't.
Well, that's just to see us, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't invest my time. I talk to people, every time I'm in New York, wherever, they're like, "Oh, where are you going?" I'm Mississippi. They're like, "Why are you always down there?" And no one thinks that Mississippi would be good, but you guys are doing some crazy stuff. I mean, there's great chefs here, and you guys are pushing and fighting and bringing in great stuff, which makes it really exciting. There's so many other states that should have more potential than Mississippi, but Mississippi is crushing it because you guys care.
Well, guys, we've spent a lot of time talking today, and I mean, honestly, I'm looking forward to the book, Eric, because I mean, I know you have a life story that we could talk about all day. So the Railsback story, I want to see it in store soon. Wes, we appreciate you hosting today. Your backyard's very scenic. This is our natural environment. This was the best place to talk today. Eric, we love you coming down to, the SIP. If you're wearing a Bama shirt in the Grove this weekend, I'm going to rip it off.
The Rebel Rags right after this. It's on.
Cool. Let's do it.
What are you doing for lunch? We're at City Grocery. I heard they have some bandol that's